Thanks for joining me in today's video. I'm going to give you a look at the near-term weather and the forecast as we go through the rest of this weekend into the weekend, including temperatures and precipitation. And then we've got a look ahead to what's in the thumbnail with a larger scale storm system possible towards next week around March 4th through 6th. All those details coming up right here in the next 10 to 12 minutes. Alright, I don't want to waste your time, so we're going to go ahead and jump into the future radar for the next several days. Then we'll talk more in detail about some of the temperature trends you can expect across the country as we go through the next 5 days. Let's push things out of the Tuesday evening when I'm recording this video and go ahead into our Wednesday, February 26th of 2025, where most of the country, in fact about 90 to arguably about 95% of the country, is going to be seeing almost nothing going on in terms of precipitation. Warmer than average temperatures will prevail in most zones, and that's going to mean that any precipitation we do see with this low pressure moving through some parts of the Midwest and Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, surrounding areas is expected to be falling as some rainfall up in these zones. Parts of the Great Lakes region could also briefly get some rain or some light snow as we get through our late Wednesday, but most of this precipitation is going to be fairly negligible until we start to see it pick up a little bit more. It could impact the Thursday morning commute as you get on over here into the central Appalachians, including West Virginia, Pennsylvania, even with some brief snow that will transition to rain as we go through the day into some parts of New England. You can see as we get out of Thursday morning towards our Thursday evening, a band of some brief rain and maybe thunderstorms with the brief cold front that this low pressure is going to bring through. This cold front is going to bring temperatures a little bit closer to average to finish off the week in the eastern U.S., along with bringing around some wraparound moisture that could bring some light rain or brief transitions to snow as we go out of Thursday night into Friday morning over parts of the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. Overall, though, other than Maine and no major snow out of this system, the rainfall accumulations won't be too significant in other zones. This system's out of here, and we're on to the next one while everybody else remains dry by the time we go out of late Thursday and then through the day on Friday. Here's your next system. This is going to mean for some Friday into Saturday breeziness over this quarter of the northern and into the northeastern U.S. We'll see some brief snow into some parts of Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan if this model continues to hold true, and we're within the realm of confidence that it does look likely that we will see some brief snowfall accumulation through some parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe even transitioning down briefly into the glove as we go through some parts of the day Friday into Saturday. We'll get some spotty cold rain, some interior northeast light to moderate snow if this guidance continues to hold for our Saturday afternoon, but then this low pressure system is going to be out of here by the time we get through our late Saturday evening, and we're moving on to what's next, and that's going to be that larger scale active pattern that looks more likely, especially as we go beyond March 3rd and deeper into next week. Now that we've overviewed those two systems expected as we go through the next 5 days, let's go ahead and briefly take a look at how much precipitation is expected between the two of them by the time we get through our early Sunday morning. And unless you're on up here into parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, the Ohio Valley region, into the mid-Atlantic, some parts of the Northeast, pretty much nobody seeing much measurable precipitation, maybe a little bit of light precipitation out of that midweek front down into some parts of the Carolinas and Virginia. But otherwise, these greens, even on up here in the Northeast U.S., greens turning to blues, only a tenth to a quarter, maybe up to a half an inch of precipitation in some zones. It will fall as snow on up there in the far interior northeast, though, so if you find yourself in any of those zones where I showed the blue on the map just a minute ago, indicating that snowfall, make sure you're checking weather.gov. That's your National Weather Service website. It will provide more details on where those isolated areas that see snow, how much you could pick up in those spots. With that being said, let's now pivot on over here to a temperature anomaly and trend discussion as we're going to talk about what's on the way as we go through the next 5 days in temperatures across the country, starting with this European model and what it's indicating as we go into tomorrow, our Wednesday, February 26th, whether it's from California, Nevada, up to Washington and Oregon, or from the Dakotas back down over to the Mississippi River Valley, the Ohio River Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, you name it. Unless you're in the Rockies, most of the country looking to be about 10, 15, 20 degrees above normal for our temperatures as we go into our Wednesday. A lot of the western and central zones are going to remain in that red and remaining above average as we finish this week and head towards the weekend, but you will notice things get a little bit closer to average to finish this week around Friday into some parts of the country, especially east of the Mississippi River Valley, as we'll see that brief system move through Wednesday into Thursday that I talked about. That's going to drag a cold front off the East Coast that could bring temperatures a little closer to normal, and then we'll actually briefly cool down even more. We'll get a quick warm up around Saturday, and then we see the cold air come back even more due to that second system moving off the East Coast. Temperatures could be around 5 to 10 to 15 degrees below average over a pretty big expanse here, again, around and east of the Mississippi River Valley as we go into the upcoming weekend. But that warmth, temperatures around to above average continuing for the plains and the west, with a ridge continuing to develop and become more prominent there as we finish the weekend and head into next week. And then as we start to see cool air move into the west by around the 3rd into the 4th of March, and warm air then moving into areas that were just cool in the east, that creates a contrast, and that's where we could see a much larger scale storm system develop and move across a larger area of the country, and that's what I'll be breaking down in just a couple of minutes. Since we've talked about the temperature anomalies expected through the next several days, let's look at some of those days with the forecasted high temperatures. How far above average is 15 degrees above average here into a lot of the country? That brings you up into the 50s as far north as the Midwest over into the Ohio Valley regions of the U.S. Far southern parts of Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, even getting into the 60s, climbing on up there as we get through our Wednesday afternoon. Back down here closer to the southwest U.S. and California, parts of Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico, as you get through those orangish shades going towards the reds, getting out of the 70s, and yeah, starting to feel a little bit of that spring coming on in a place like Phoenix, Arizona, as many spots there in the southern part of the state, getting on up through the 70s and 80s into our Wednesday. Lots of 70s as well on these states bordering the Gulf and the southeast coast of the U.S. That will continue into Thursday in a lot of those zones. You will notice the warmth spikes up even a little bit more as we continue to see ridging in the central U.S. with 50s and 60s up towards Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa Thursday. But we do have a little bit of that cooler flow now starting to begin with some of those 30s and 40s, at least closer to average, through some parts of the Great Lakes Midwest behind that first cold front of the week. Let me just briefly show you what Friday's looking like. More warmth, 70s even as far north as far southern Nebraska and Iowa into our Friday. By Saturday, look at that. That warmth suppressed just a little bit because of that secondary cool down, and this is going to be that bigger one that leaves those temperature anomalies bigger into the eastern half of the country as we go out of Saturday into Sunday, and we'll talk about some of these more specific temperatures for these days in detail in a future video. Now that we've talked about the near-term pattern, I do want to spend the back 3, 4, 5 minutes of this video breaking down a longer-range signal that I'm seeing here using this blended guidance, particularly these European ensembles. This is like running a bunch of European model runs all at the same time, then blending them together. That's what you're looking at here. 6-hour precipitation rates and where the highest confidence is in those heavier rates as we go towards next week. Let's start things out as we go through the end of the weekend and into our Monday, March 3rd of 2025, where I'm going to be watching a couple of things. I think we could see a brief, what I'm going to call it probably in the future, a precursor system. That could move on out here somewhere into the central or maybe even the southern and eastern U.S. sometime around March 3rd into early March 4th. We'll have to keep an eye on that, but that's not really a big signal that would probably cause any sort of major impacts for many people. But you see some of this energy moving into the west around March 3rd. This is low pressure entering the west, and I always say when you got strong energy moving into the west, that's normally your origin zone for big scale systems, whether it's a winter storm in the middle of winter, or now as we're pushing into March, a bigger scale system that could produce severe weather. A lot of big troughs or pieces of jet stream energy that bring rainfall and snowfall with them tend to move through the west first, and I think we see something like that out of March 3rd into March 4th, and then we start to see this guidance really blowing up a low pressure somewhere into the central plains around at the early part of the day, especially as we go overnight March 3rd and then into this morning time frame of our Tuesday, March 4th. Am I saying there's going to be a system in the middle of the country? Definitely. No, I am not. What I am saying, though, is that there is this very high confidence signal indicating, especially from the Mississippi Valley back down to the south central plains, we could have an area of rain and wind beginning to blow up around this time frame, and you could certainly be seeing, with all of the warmer than average air in place, some severe weather, especially the further back down you go towards places like, say, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas around this time frame. Guidance certainly hinting at that. And there's an existing signal for at least some precipitation to be possible on up here, although it would be lighter up into the north central U.S. But could that mean up here on the lighter side of precipitation, it's a little bit cooler and we get some snow? That's something we're going to have to watch further on up through the upper Midwest, the north central plains, eventually pushing into the Great Lakes. Here goes the signal as we go through the day, March 4th. Into the beginning of our March 5th. This is just some guidance. It's definitely going to change, and we're definitely going to get more specific model data as we get closer, but we could certainly have low pressure pivoting through the Mississippi Valley over into the Ohio Valley and Mid-South. Severe weather possibly being a big threat down towards, say, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, after moving in from points westbound of that as we go out of March 4th into the early part of our March 5th. European ensembles continue to show this system being strong, with possibly some colder side snow on up into the Great Lakes on the wraparound side of this system. Some very heavy rain, gusty winds, severe thunderstorms moving up the east coast as we go through the afternoon and evening hours of our March 5th. This is not a guarantee, but it's certainly looking like a bigger scale system is likely to move out of the central plains and towards the east, beginning March 4th especially, then as we go towards March 5th and 6th. So that's why I'm showing you this guidance, because, I mean, when you see those darks of grays and greens already on the screen this early on, when we're, at this point 200 hours out from this frame I have on the screen, that's pretty high confidence, and that's certainly a signal that we need to be watching. Here's a quick look at the atmospheric side of this system, looking at the jet stream 15 to 20,000 feet on up into the atmosphere. This is your GFS ensembles, basically a complete opposite set of modeling, but still coming together and blending together a bunch of models. This is just not your European ensembles, this is your GFS ensembles and what they're showing as we go into next week. And look at that, a big dip in the jet stream coming down and then kind of moving up on out here out of parts of the South Central and then on up into the Midwest US. That would transport a lot of moisture north. And it would also mean, especially on the leading edge where you see those likely oranges that are already showing up, that's a big signal for this far out. We could see severe weather that shifts through a lot of the South Central and eventually over to the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic regions of the U.S., especially those zones I have circled, maybe even a little bit further north if we get that warmer than average air to continue moving north and the jet stream dip to also do the same. This could be a big scale system, and I don't say that to scare you. Of course, there's no need to be scared when it comes to the weather, but just keep an eye out for this system, as it certainly looks like it could bring big impacts. And of course, on that far northern side of this jet stream dip, we could watch snowing up here into the Midwest. Looks like an active setup, and I'm going to be fired up talking about this as we enter spring severe weather season, and there's going to be a lot for me to be keeping you updated on, with plenty more like this to probably come as we go through March, April, into May, etc. Now that I've been fired up, let's go ahead and recap this video, tone it down a little bit as we talk about especially the next big storm that's going to be on the way as we go towards around March 4th through 6th. Large-scale impacts are looking more and more likely, not a guarantee, but more and more likely for the central into the eastern U.S. The ensemble guidance shows it, whether it's the European ensembles or the GFS ensembles, that we could also have some severe weather going on, especially the further south you go and closer to that stronger piece of jet stream energy or that trough in the jet stream that will move on through, especially out of the 4th, 5th, and into, again, the 6th time frame. Snow could be possible on the northern end of this system. It could have a very big field of gusty wind as well. Plenty more that I'll be keeping you updated on in the future. That's it for this video, but make sure you're hitting that subscribe button down below so you never miss any future updates.